over the years, I've been influenced by a lot of different guitarists and people who have followed our music over the years. The obvious influence would be The Edge, of course, who's influenced so many people. But for me, it was a lot more people than that. It was he was a big influence. But Andy Summers before that, the first time that I heard The Police, the first time that I heard their very first song, I wanted to play electric guitar. And before that, it had been mainly kind of folk music, and I loved singer-songwriters, acoustic, James Taylor and Joni Mitchell, and you know, Richard Thompson, people like that. And hearing Andy Summers for the first time and the way he used space with his guitar and how sparse it was made me want to play electric guitar, to pick up an electric guitar and play it. And he was a big influence. But then even after that, I really kind of sought out other bands and artists that had those kind of feels, like a real atmospheric feel to it. And probably if I had to pick one guitarist that was the single biggest influence for me, even over The Edge, it would be Robin Guthrie of Cocktail Twins. Would be by far the single biggest influence in my guitar playing ever. And interestingly enough, we're about the same age, and so I was already doing bands when I started following Cocktail Twins, and they were doing stuff, but you kind of incorporate those influences into your music. But I always loved the way he used echoes and delays and reverbs and just all the soundscapes he created, and how minimal everything was. He wasn't trying to show off. He wasn't some big flashy player. He's just a guy that just really hears well, and he hears these things in his head and he knows how to get them out. The other big influence for me was the two guys in the Church, Peter Copps and Marty Wilson Piper. And even though their thing is real jangly and stuff, they do incorporate a lot of this kind of atmospheric thing. You know, I guess for me, I like the minimalist approach. I like the idea of, instead of playing 6 strings, can I play it with 2 strings? And how can I make this one guitar line sound really, really big? And like I said before, Brian Eno was a huge influence. But then there's also been a slew of other bands over the years. My Bloody Valentine, Kevin Shields is a guitar player in that band, and he did some things that nobody had ever done before, sound-wise, that still to this day are some of the most amazing things I've ever heard. And the My Bloody Valentine record, Loveless, was a huge influence when we started doing like the more Kissers and Killers thing in the choir, because I started doing the tremolo arm, you know, like he was doing, and I was trying to get that vibe that he had. And I went and I got to see My Bloody Valentine in LA at the Rock Scene. It was one of the most impressive shows I've ever seen. And all they did is stand there, and all he did is stare at his feet, and it was this huge wall of sound. It was so huge. And another influence was some obscure bands. This band called the House of Love. That was a British band in the 80s, and the guitar player, he ended up doing a band called Leviathan, and that was a big thing for me too. It was almost like pre My Bloody Valentine, and doing a lot of the same kind of things. And then even the current ambient scene, which is so cool. Stars of the Lid are a huge influence for me, and Mark Bird's band Hammock is a big influence for me. And there's, you know, Explosions in the Sky, which is like a great band, and they actually do the music for the Friday Night Lights TV series. And a band called Mogwai, which is another little harder thing, but really great. But again, over the years, it's always been about how things sound. And I'm less. I appreciate a great lyric, but I'm really less into the lyrical thing than I am just the sound of stuff.